Brenda Gunn resumed two passions. Only two, Brenda? Oh, genealogy and writing, when she retired in 2017 after 33 years as an elementary and special education teacher with Edmonton Public Schools, with her full sanity too. She has since documented almost all branches of her family tree. What kind of tree is it? Is it a birch tree or? I'm just kidding. Completed a certificate in creative writing with honors from the University of Toronto, and is currently enrolled in Poetry 3 with Catherine Graham. I know Catherine Graham, and she is an excellent poet and teacher. Good one, you're in good hands. Brenda has two family history-inspired poetry collections in various stages of completion, and has published poetry in several journals and anthologies, including Parkland Poets Outlying Voices, the Edmonton Stroll of Poets Anthology 2021, Polar Expressions, Canadian Stories, Human to Human, and online with Poetry X Hunger. This spring, her poem Interprovincial won honorable mention in the Spring Pulse Poetry Festival's Dr. William Henry Drummond Poetry Contest. Isn't that interesting? I just happened to be the administrator. I wasn't the judge, but there was, yes, it's a great accomplishment because it's a highly competitive contest. Poets all across Canada, top poets across Canada enter it. So kudos to you, Brenda. Brenda's latest project is especially near and dear to her heart and could be subtitled Labor of Love. There we go. Aha. A just released self-published compilation of her mother's poetry titled The Rosedale Readings. And let's see. Brenda will, after her reading, introduce her mom, the prairie poet, Ellamae Ingram Gunn, who should be reading from for her collection, the Rosedale Readings. So wonderful round of applause for Brenda.
Thank you so much, David. But yes, this is all about my mom, a poet who I happen to know fairly well. So I'm honored to introduce her, Ellamae Ingram Gunn. And as David mentioned, this is all about this new project of self-published collection of mom's poetry that spans 40, probably more than 40 years. So I'm going to just give a short bio about of mom, and then I'll just talk a little bit about how the project came to be. And then mom is going to read 5 poems from her collection. So mom is a family historian and published author and public speaker who for several decades wrote, entertained audiences with her plays, poetry readings, and humorous skits. She began writing as a girl, drawing inspiration from her childhood during the Depression on the farm, and later as a registered nurse in the post-war era that saw the advent of penicillin and the polio vaccine amid the heyday of the oil boom in Alberta's heartland. Moving from Rimbey to Red Deer to Drumheller and Provost, Alberta, while raising 4 girls did not deter mom from pursuing her passions. The local newspaper, the Provost News, bravely ran letters and opinion pieces that reflected mom's strong views on current events, women's issues, social justice, and the environment, themes which also informed her poetry. Encouraged with her first win in 1964 for a poem called The Stars Look Down, which mom will read later, she enrolled in distance writing courses, joined the Macklin Literary Club just across the border in Saskatchewan, and later was a member of the Saskatchewan and the Alberta Writers Guilds. And mom took every opportunity to attend readings, retreats, and book launches, and traveled to present her poetry. During this period, mom met and worked with lots of local writers, including just a few: Sharon Butala, Guy Vanderhage, Candace Jane Dorsey, Maria Campbell, and Rudy Weeb. Mom won a number of Canadian Authors Association Edmonton branch poetry contests, and her work appeared in several of their Alberta poetry yearbooks, some of which I have in my possession. Some really cool vintage poetry yearbooks that has not been in publication, I think, for quite a few years. Since then, Mom has published in the Star Weekly, Western People magazine, the Edmonton Journal, the CBC radio show anthology, Freelance, the Saskatchewan Writers Guild magazine, the Alberta Writers Guild magazine, Westward. 19 of Mom's poems were broadcast on Sheila Martindale's CBC radio show, Cabbages and Kings, in 1985 and 1986. And that same year, in 1986, Mom's poem Armageddon, which she will also read, won the Canadian Author and Bookman Editor's Choice Award for Best Canadian Poem. Mom added to her repertoire when she joined my hometown's local drama club, the Provost Prairie Players. And before long, Mom had written, produced, directed, and starred in her own play called Not a Drop to Drink. They say laughter's the best medicine, and this next bit might explain some things about my mom and her amazing longevity. She'd become a sought-after local speaker at anniversaries and weddings and graduations, but she was particularly known for her humorous pieces, and including her alter ego called Olga. Olga was a frisky Scandinavian divorcee sporting a mangled Swedish accent and leopard print tights. Mom actually toured as Olga for several years, even after she and Dad had retired to Devon, Alberta in the early 90s. Mom's legacy of poetry, humor, and fun is inspirational proof that it's never too late to follow your dreams. Notably, on September 23rd this year, Mom turned 94 years young. Mom recently wondered why we hadn't celebrated her birthday in the usual fashion, and I had to remind her that COVID prohibited her progeny from various households from enjoying drinks and dancing the night away at her favorite hangout, the Blues on White. Phew, I don't know if we're going to have time for any poetry reading after that. Just a really brief background on this poetry collection, the Rosedale Readings, which is on Amazon in print and ebook. Mom moved to a seniors residence in Edmonton called the Rosedale Estates just this past July at the age of 93. One of her first orders of business was to arrange weekly poetry readings. And I jumped on board to assist, with word processing and organizing the poems. And the readings were a huge hit, of course, and the audience was always eager to hang around after to share their own memories of growing up on the farm and their depression years, etc. And after one of the sessions, a woman named Grace asked Mom if she'd ever published a book of her poetry, and saying how great it would be to be able to read along with the poems or contemplate them after Mom had read aloud. So, of course, as Mom is apologizing to Grace that she never did get around to doing that, my head was exploding with the possibility of getting this done. So the Rosedale Readings was born. So thanks to Grace for planting the seed, and a special shout out to Leif Gregerson of Edmonton for showing me the self-publishing ropes. Without further ado, I think we still have some time left for my mom to actually read. So I'm going to turn it over to my mom, Ellamae Ingram Gunn, and she is going to read 5 poems from the collection. The first poem she's going to start with is called Unsung Song. And a note that I had seen on the poem said that it was one of her earliest attempts to make my own kind of music. So Mom, go ahead, you're on. Read Unsung Song.
Thank you, Brenda. Yes, I'll start with this first poem, I guess you can say, that I ever wrote. So, Unsung Song. Deep within me, as in limbo, imprisoned in my soul and heart, waiting for an inspiration to urge me, pen in hand, to start writing words of love and beauty, uninhibited and free, waiting to come surging, pouring in wealth of meaning out of me, lies a font of thought and feeling, still unexplored and unexpressed, yearning, burning, trying, crying to my mind, give up your best. Oh, my soul to unencumber, open up a channel wide, free me to express and number all of this I have inside, so I may put my thoughts on paper and perhaps to make a book that all may search my soul in depth if there they chance to look. And that was my first ever poem.
We did make a book.
Yes.
The next one Mom will read is called The Stars Look Down, and she wrote this one in 1964, I think, as I mentioned in the bio. It won honorable mention in short poem class in the Canadian Authors Contest and was published in the 35th annual Alberta Poetry Yearbook. And it just is worth mentioning that when Mom wrote this poem, my older sister and I were in grades 2 and 3, and Mom had a toddler at home and an 11-month-old baby at the same time. The stars looked down.
Oh, thank you, Brenda. The stars looked down with steadfast, bright, unblinking stare through the vastness of eternal night upon a tiny speck of dust revolving there. They watched with eyes of white hot light this tiny bit of earth give birth to life. The stars looked down with sweeping gaze through millennia of dust and haze. They looked, they stared, they looked again. From out that newborn land of men, a silver streak, gleaming bright, blazed through interstellar night. Arrow straight the path it traced, on and on through outer space, past constellations beyond Mars, and on it came, to them, the stars.
The next one is called On His Blindness. Sorry, Mom. On His Blindness was written for a cousin, Bill Holmes, who'd already lost his sight when Mom and Dad visited on a family history research trip to Missouri in 1969. And On His Blindness won in the short poem class, the Canadian Authors Contest, and was published in the 48th Alberta Poetry Yearbook in 1977. So this one's On His Blindness.
Okay. On his blindness. I waved goodbye to eyes that cannot see the day. You stood on the porch in the cold wind and listened to my footsteps turn away. But in that melancholy moment between warmth and loneliness, I left a bit of myself blooming in the red geranium on your windowsill.
And the next one is called Armageddon. As I mentioned, Armageddon was chosen for Best Canadian Poem of the Year in 1986 and was later broadcast on Cabbages and Kings. Okay, Armageddon.
Armageddon. A cadaverous Douglas fir, spiked colossus, last guardian of the headland, leans cataleptic, ghostly gray over a craggy cliff, naked to the wind and salt sea spray. Impaled upon the withered head, a sulfurous mist yields stinking yellow rain. The great tree broods above a spuming wasteland, gnarled roots locked in ancient stone. Hunched, wind-tossed, claw-clenched to barren branch, a solitary eagle waits. Fierce eyes watch the water of the bay. Massive wings spread, the rapture streaks a jaundiced sky and strikes his prey. Dark water sprays from flopping bullet body, silver scaled, gripped in rigid talons, barbed scimitars of death. Perched on his tree, the great bird eats the last fish, brewed in ocean's acid breath. Foredoomed, they brood together by the sea, the last bald eagle and the last great tree.
And just another note about Armageddon. Mom was inspired to write this poem after a fishing trip near Powell River, BC, with her sister Ann Drader. An eagle swooped near their boat and snatched up a salmon they'd caught and released. Mom watched it return to the tree, the effluents from the Powell River pulp and paper mill visible below. And I just kind of always thought this theme of this poem reminds me of many of Max van der Steen's. it's kind of that uneasy balance between the need to work to feed your family and concerns about the environment. And Mom's sister, my Aunt Anne, who's almost 98 and still lives in Powell River, wasn't in favor of the tone of this poem. She kind of thought it shed a bad light on Powell River and the mill where her husband Art spent most of his working life. But of course, that didn't deter Mom from writing it, publishing it, and probably actually spurred her to do it even more. The last one that Mom will read is called Song of Autumn. And this is a fall theme, which is a recurring theme in much of Mom's poetry. She was born in September and she married my dad, Jim, in September of 1950. So the harvest season holds a special place in her heart. Song of Autumn won honorable mention in the Canadian Authors 1977 contest as well, and was published in that same yearbook. So Song of Autumn.
Okay. For you, I said, offering the small bouquet, dainty orange yellow miniature snapdragon mouths, splashing autumn colors in my hand. Gently you took my pensive gift of prairie places. A screen of silver willow filtered autumn sunlight on our faces and reflected in our eyes a September painted meadow that keeps no record of our lingering. Only the wind and trampled grass bear witness to our passing here. And their song, a silent sighing, falls on nature's timeless ear.
I'm just wondering about the time, David and Stephanie.
There's more poems here.
Would I have time to read one of Mom's as well?
Yes, you're at almost 14 minutes. So between the two of you had 16 minutes. So there's a couple of minutes to go.
Okay.
The rest of these, I only read 2 of these.
Yeah, I'm going to read one called You Can't Go Back. A lot of Mom's poems, obviously the theme is about nostalgia and sort of visiting the past. And this is it's a little bit of a longer one, so I'll just read this one, but it's called You Can't Go Back. You can't go back. The farmhouse sits forlorn upon the hill, its gaping windows patched with broken glass. A host to birds that perch upon the sill and nest in climbing vine and tangled grass. No breezes stir the ancient poplars there. No children's laughter echoes down the lane. No bird song climbs the silence of the air. No silken whisper from a field of grain. The big old tree is now a splintered stump. The swing hangs from a piece of fraying rope. And standing all alone, the rusty pump, its handle raised as if it still had hope. I hear my mother's footsteps on the creaky kitchen floor. I hear the mice at work behind the wall. I see my father's hand upon the sagging old screen door and smell the lye soap from the washstand in the hall. The sad day came, the farm was up for sale. Off went the cows and pigs and all they had, the cream cans and the battered old milk pail. I felt bereft, forlorn, and very sad. I climbed the narrow stairs of weathered wood, where the wicked winter wind would shrill and moan. I recall those days it felt so good to warm myself against the chimney stone. The ghosts are gone and I am all alone. Sunlight filters through a mouse-chewed crack. I lean against the cold, hard chimney stone. A voice inside me cries, "You can't go back." Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone.